Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got the return of three awesome guests. We got Chris, we got Emily, we got Greg on the other side. I am stoked to get this conversation started. Now, while I am stoked, y'all should be excited too. Make sure you're liking the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day for the rest of this year, that is. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage them directly, kind of like this one, Daniel Labonte. Afternoon. Good to see you, Daniel. And we will hit them up as we go through the show. We are going to be talking about mindset in relationships. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it. But before we get into it, let's get some intros out of the way. Let's start with Greg, and then we'll work our way down. Who are you? Where you come from? 10, 15 seconds. Hit it.
Greg Everett from California, live in Oregon. I coach world-class Olympic weightlifters, and I run a company called Catalyst Athletics that produces educational content for weightlifters and coaches.
Bam. I like it. Emily, how about yourself?
I'm Emily McCarthy. I'm from Florida. I, in a previous life, was in the CIA, and now I run a company called GoRuck with my husband.
Bam. I like it. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, Chris Strand, Okotoks, Alberta. Whole bunch of stuff, motivational speaking. Been in the firefighting industry, have a hockey school. Whole rash of things.
All over the place. I like it. This is the benefit of the network, is we have people from all over the world right now watching as well as participating. I'm excited. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about mindset in relationships. So I want to just hit on what a relationship mindset is, and that refers to the set of attitudes, beliefs, and perspectives that individuals bring to their interactions and connections with others. It encompasses how one perceives and approaches relationships, whether they be romantic, familiar, platonic, or professional. Some of the key some of the key elements: communication, empathy, growth, respect, teamwork, trust, positivity. There's a whole list here, but I'm not going to get into all of it. But the first thing I do want to ask is, what are you guys' first thoughts when you guys hear mindset in relationships? What is your first thoughts? Emily, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I knew you were going to do that. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that the Dunbar number. Are you familiar with that? It's like an anthropologist who just said, basically, you can have the numbers like 148, which people round up to 150. That's the amount of relationships that you can manage. That's like what a normal tribe was like. And so that's what I think about mindset wise, because I think where we are today, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the number of relationships that you need to manage. And that for me, whenever I'm feeling that way, I come back to that sort of fact. And I think about, I'm thinking about this, I'll let you know, I just sent out a bunch of Christmas cards, and I have 150 people on my list. Now, sometimes it gets, people move, they don't give me their address. I could hunt them down, but I'm also like, maybe they don't want me to hunt them down. But and sometimes, there's more people that come into your life that you're like, okay, you're on the list. Last night I had these two younger babysitter friends of younger girls. And I was about to ask them for their address. And then I was like, they might not want this. This can be a burden. So 150 is kind of a magic number. And I use it a lot as a barometer.
I like that. My wife's got the Christmas card list out right now, and I don't think we're at 150, but I'm gonna put a cap on it. That's a good number. Greg, what are your first thoughts?
Honestly, my first thought with the topic when you told me earlier is that I think very few people even consider this in any way, to any extent throughout their lives. And it creates a lot of problematic relationships and the way that we interact. And we kind of coast on inertia through our lives for the most part, but in particular with our relationships. And that's why you see the repetition of the exact same problems over and over and over again, that we learned from previous relationships, or that we witnessed in parents' relationships, siblings' relationships, whatever. And so it's an interesting idea to actually, isolate that from the experience and consider it more conceptually and intellectually. And I'm actually very curious to hear what these guys have to say, because right now I don't know what I'm going to say.
I like it. I like it. Chris, how about yourself? What are your first thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, both of them touched on some fantastic points, and for me, I mean, that mindset piece really transitions across to, having some very common ground. Just much like Greg, and dealing with elite level athletes, and in that realm, I find that there's a few things that obviously top that list off. Much like respect, having those types of parallels that are immediately sort of there, so that you're getting involved with the right type of person. Because I've made some poor choices in my life, in helping people out in that sense, and not sort of maybe looking past something, or not seeing some red flags that have sort of come up, and also to Emily's point, overextended myself in a sense where I was trying to manage far too many relationships, and just then you're not able to actually put in.
Oh, I think we lost him there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Let's we'll shift on to the next one. Shaun, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Dunbar number. That's freaking awesome. I've never heard of it. I'm going to eyeball that for sure. But I think there's, whether it's hard and fast carved in stone, as in that's the way it is, 150, no more. I like the idea that there's a sense of capping something. I like the fact that at least it provides people the concept of, have you ever thought about the number, bro? Because I never have up until that point. And so I think that's a fascinating aspect of relationships, that we should all consider how many people we actually need in our life, or do we have too many people in our lives, or just the number aspect alone would be an entire conversation that I'd be happy to talk about. And then to the further points, like I also believe that not enough people consider what relationships should be, or should mean to them, or could mean to them, or and then onto the mistakes that have been made in relationships. I've overextended myself for sure, and sometimes I've ignored red flags. And so kind of cobbling all of that together, because I hadn't, as I often do, I came in with kind of a blank mind and just thought, I'll see what the guests have to say. I'm thinking like, thank you, dear, the concentric circles of friendships. That's how I run things nowadays. I kind of think of it as a concentric circle based scenario, where I have my inner group, and then from the inner group it kind of builds out from there. And it doesn't mean that people are out on the fringes of the concentric circles are like not cool people, or they're not great friends. They're just, it's a different level of relationship, whereby either through commitment, or either through such an extensive period of time, somehow a person has worked their way into my inner circle, as I like to think of it. And it means that I have a lot of trust in them. It also means that we've probably had some skin in the game. And it also probably means that they've got my six, they've got my back. And so it's people who I trust and have faith in, and know that, I could hand them my kids and say, can you look after my kids when I'm gone, however long I'm gone for? And so these kind of, in my head, established, long-time, trustworthy, honest, righteous people have worked their way into my inner circle. And then from there, it kind of feeds out. So my mindset with my inner circle is different than the concentric circles that go build out towards the fringe. And again, out on the fringe, it doesn't mean that you're not cool. It just means that you just haven't been in the game with me long enough to be in that inner circle yet. That's my first thoughts.
I really like that. It's a good realm to go down. Emily, I'm going to come back to you on this. Any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
It's totally like firing some synapses right now, putting it all together like that, Shaun. It's the messy part of life, right? Dealing with other people and the level of relationships, and how to manage those and understand them, and we have limited time and resources to do so. What's always sort of interesting to me is the thought that sometimes your innermost circle is not the people that sometimes can be some of the hardest, right? Like you sometimes need to go outside of that inner circle to get a more objective look on things. And I'm talking about the dynamics of people you grow up with. And, at the risk of sounding like a meme, this talk of siblings, and if if you're blessed to have a sibling, or you've had trouble with that, or if you're an only child, it doesn't really matter because there's sibling-like relationships. But it's this idea that I've been seeing floating around the internet, which resonates on some level. It's like your siblings with you through every stage of life, if you're lucky. And it's different than your significant other. It's different than your parents, and it's different than your children, which you only have these like dedicated time with those folks. But the sibling is a really interesting one that's kind of caught my eye of late, because there's a relationship there that's very deep and hopefully spans all those different phases of life. So in terms of I think about mindset, I want to categorize things. I want to like put them in boxes and organize them in a way that it's not reality, but it's a way of sort of personally sort of understanding and seeing those types of description of relationships have kind of helped me look at that differently.
That's really interesting. I have a thought on that, but I'm going to go around one more time. Chris,
Yeah.
what are you thinking?
Sean hit the nail on the head for me. I mean, one of those first things when you do talk about that inner circle and sort of those concentric circles working out is trust. In my world, that is, a really a first and foremost type thing. And those are the people that do get closest to me at the end of the day. And I do keep that circle relatively small. So that was a fantastic point that way. And then actually speaking on Emily's point, speaking about siblings, it's been a whole different dynamic for me in that sense, given the accident that happened in my life. And it's actually, when we talk about these relationship mindset, like me and my sister are basically, we don't speak, we don't talk to each other anymore. Things went completely sideways after my accident, and the way that our relationship was based, and all those things that are supposed to be there, especially from a sibling to help somebody out and have your back and whatnot, just really sort of disappeared. And so in an odd dynamic that way, it I have the other end of the spectrum, I guess, where that relationship is almost completely severed. Obviously we can be cordial if we're at a family event or things like that together, but she would probably be the last person on my list that I'd call if I needed something, just because there's no trust there. That all of that has been completely disintegrated. And it's definitely an interesting thing that way, because I do think there's two polar opposites in the way that can work. And obviously the circumstances in which mine happened, I mean, thankfully the vast majority of people don't have to go through, but it is something out there where you can have that situation happen.
Definitely not on the Christmas card list. Greg, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've got too many to organize, so bear with me here. The Dunbar number and the concentric circles and the overextension, it all comes together perfectly, I think. And you look at the concentric circle setup, and the smaller circle, the fewer people you can fit in there. And as you get out, you can get more and more people. So it's an interesting idea to me to how are you going to divide up that 148 people, right? So for example, my inner circle is my wife and my daughter, right? That's number one. No one's going to get that close. No one's going to have that level of interaction with me. Next out is a couple best friends, outside there, these athletes that I work with extremely closely and have very close relationships with, and so on and so on. But I think one of the things that a lot of us end up doing poorly is understanding how much of ourselves we have available to genuinely invest into these various levels of relationships. So as Chris said, and I've done it a million times too, is overextending myself, trying to do too much for too many people at the same time. And then everybody suffers, including me, right? So this is not just about, it's not a selfish thing to say, I cannot have this many people in these inner circles. And it's not necessarily because you can't find good people who might be deserving of that, but it's because you have limited resources to invest in them. And the more that you are putting out, the less you have to kind of regenerate for yourself, and you're able to do a worse and worse job for these people, and those relationships suffer and you suffer. And so everybody loses in that situation. So, one of the most important things I've learned to do in the past few years of my life is to say no, right? Say no to say yes. I got to say no to all these things that are somewhat appealing, or I might feel obligated to do or pressured to do, but recognizing that if I take those things on, everybody else, these people who are very close to me that I want to serve and I need to serve, are going to suffer because of it. And I'm going to suffer. And then everybody together is going to share in that, reduced ability to have these quality relationships. And so I think that's, with regard to mindset, is understanding that each of us has to determine, what those limits are, right? So some of us are very, outgoing people, and we actually thrive on interaction. That's energizing to us. Someone like me, I have a pretty hard ceiling on that stuff. I just got back from coaching at the American Open for almost a week. I wanted to shut myself in a dark room for a week and just drink beer, right? I just needed that downtime because it was so overstimulating. And as much as I love it, there's a limit to how much of that I can do. Whereas other people, it's like they can't wait. They want to go back the next day and do it more and more and more. So yeah, I think while that 148 number is probably pretty accurate across the board, I think what probably varies among us is the extent of those relationships within that number, right? So some of us more extroverted might be able to have those deeper, more invested relationships with more people, while as the more introverted of us may have to reduce that to a very small number of people and have, I don't want to say superficial, but not quite as deeply invested relationships with the greater number.
Yeah, that is a great point. Shaun?
Sorry for taking up the entire show with that one
It's all
answer.
good. You got like 2 minutes. It's all good. Shaun, what do you got?
That's great, because that is kind of where my head's at as well. And funnily enough, that's why we have a thing called the collective, because whatever my number is, I have no idea. There was a time before the collective existed where there was too many. The number was too big. The people that I was investing in, the people that were connecting with me saying, hey, could you give me a hand, or whatever the case is, it was just too big. And so I wanted to scale up my tiny little world to be more helpful. And so Chance and I started this collective thing, and over a period of time, it has scaled up, and it's been helpful to more people than I could help just by myself. And so that's why, and it's taken quite a few months for me to realize this, that's why I appreciate having guests on. When they come on, I understand that they too have, I didn't know it was called a Dunbar number, but I understood that they have a limitation within their lives, and that when they give us an hour of their time, I really value it. And it isn't about somebody's name, and it isn't about how large and in charge they are. It's just that I get that anyone that comes on this show nowadays is cool, and they're probably busy, and they could probably spend that time elsewhere, but they've given it to a group that is bigger than themselves. So in a sense, it's a bunch of Dunbar people connecting in an hour to put out a bigger Dunbar number, as I see it. And so it's taken me again a while to understand that, but I to the guest today, I really appreciate that. And so I think these kind of formats, or these mediums where people are connecting like this and putting out their own wisdoms, if it can scale up to some degree where it's hitting 1,000 people rather than 148 people, I see that as a good thing. And I think that sometimes that's the messaging that is missed in social media. Certainly it was for me for a while, is that we're connecting at a larger, not inner circle scale, but certainly at a concentric scale that is not out on the fringes. It's probably somewhere between the person that I just nodded on the street on occasion, maybe once a year. It's somewhere between there and my inner circle. But there's definitely a concentric circle in my mind now called the collective. And I don't know all of the people that are involved in it, but I know all the guests. And it's over 250 people that I've met to this date. So I've already blown through my Dunbar number. And I already considered that group of people as like cool people that I would happily shake hands with, sit down and hang out with for a day if I could. Every single one of them. There's people that have been repeats on the show that I now have said to them, at least in my mind, and some of them I've said privately to in the green room conversations after the fact, bro, like if I had to bounce somewhere, I'd for sure let you look after my kids because you're like cool as a cucumber. And so I think it through these kind of digital mediums, I believe that there's maybe another scale, and I don't know what it's called. Let's not call it the Shaun scale because that would be weird. But there's some
The
sort of
collective
scale.
scale.
Yeah, the collective scale, right? So I think that there's some kind of scale that I don't yet understand because I didn't understand the Dunbar scale until, about 15 minutes ago. So there's probably a different scale out there that is plus of 250 people for sure that I consider as friends within my circle of friends that I would give a lot of my time to, or I would somehow give a nod to in a way that is potent, as it were.
Well, why is that, Shaun? I mean, is it because for 1 hour, like that's a connecting with someone that a lot of relationships don't even get to, right? Where it's like, hey, come on for 1 hour and let's just talk and listen. Like that's significant, in the grand scheme of things. Like that's how you get to, you get a good sense of someone in that time. So I think what the collective is doing, which I find fascinating, that you guys are doing this that you've said you're going to do this every day for a year. I think that's one, committing a lot of your time to listening to people, which is basically what you do. And then, it's the, many ears, many hands make light work, but many ears, make a larger collective of what you're doing. So I think it's being heard and resonating through that. And it can, like you're saying, it can even go beyond this 150 number that was probably based on just pure anthropology, right?
And that's where, I think that's where, when we're talking about, this relationship mindset, like where we all have some very similar parallels in that sense, right? And the group of people that you guys have had on the show and everything along those lines, they're being referred to you guys or however it works, but you're having people with a lot of the same mindset coming onto the show, and they see the value of it, right? And value in a friendship is obviously, something that is very prominent. And as Shaun was saying, like for people here to give up that hour of their day, they're obviously seeing a tremendous amount of value in what's going on, and they're understanding that everyone else on the show is also doing that along the same lines, taking that time out of their day because they see the value of it overall, which is part of a mindset that I think most of us look for when we're, especially within our inner circles or, closer inner circles. You have value within relationships where that what you're doing is making a difference within people or helping them out that way. And we all realize that, this group that you guys have compiled is making a very big difference across the board. And it's something that we might not all be able to do individually, but being allowed to have a forum in this sense is allowing us to just impact so many more people.
Absolutely. Greg, you got any thoughts on this?
Of course I do, Chance. It is really fascinating to me the way that the digital social media world has changed what we are capable of doing in terms of reaching people and interacting with people. And Shaun talked about this kind of expansion of the sort of the friend circle with guests on the show, but I look at it too as, with a show like this, with any podcast, I have a pretty large social media online presence, and I reach a huge audience. And I look at that, it's a force multiplier in effect, right? So I'm one guy, but I can literally reach hundreds of thousands of people with the same amount of time that it would take me to have a really quality interaction with one person, right? So I'm able to I hesitate to say interact, because it's not a lot of two-way. It's primarily one way. I'm putting things out, but I'm continually surprised and honored and gratified when I hear from people that I don't know, but who use my information or whatever, follow me, and are so appreciative and grateful, and they feel like they do have a genuine personal connection with me. And then I, in turn, feel like I have a genuine personal connection with them. And in some cases, I actually meet them in person at some point. Other cases, I never even know their real names. But it's fascinating to me that you can have what on cursory inspection looks like an extremely superficial kind of, meaningless sort of digital relationship, but that can be transformed based on the way that the people involved use it and value it into something that's incredibly meaningful and helpful to them in their own lives. And so that to me has been like the most gratifying thing. Is I can't stand social media in so many ways and on so many levels. But then there's those little pieces like that where it's like, well, this is what makes it worth it, right? At the same time, it's like, yeah, this is an hour of my day. I've got lots of stuff to do. But selfishly, I learn a bunch of stuff. I now know what the Dunbar number is, for example. I meet cool people who have interesting stories and a lot of really smart things to say, and it makes me smarter. But also, it's this chance for me to extend myself so far beyond what I could actually do in traditional, in-person relationships. And that's going to peter off right there. I don't really know where else to go with that, but please, Chance, save me at any moment. Jump in here, buddy.
Yeah, I got you. Don't worry.
Yeah,
okay, Emily, what do you got?
I was going to say, I think that's just what you're describing is the reality we're living in today. This is a tool. It amplifies these things. You are actually connecting with people. You are, getting your message across. It's being received. There even is some interaction, even though sometimes limited through DMs or whether other thing. It can actually be significant. I mean, Shaun and I had an interaction after the last collective, and I've been thinking about it since then, like something he shared with me, and it's like that's a meaningful interaction. So, but there's something that always kind of I'm always find it interesting as from a relationship perspective, is that whether it be meeting someone in person that you knew online or meeting a celebrity, what is the highest compliment you think you can give someone? What comes to mind? I'm just asking the crowd.
That's a good question.
Oh, I think easily that someone has found some value in something I've told them or shared or whatever that has positively affected their life. I mean, I don't think it can get any better than that, that they somehow their life has been improved by something I did, said, or represented.
That's a great one. Chris, you got thoughts on that?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Just having, in my world, the adaptive world, having somebody come up to me and just, seen or, heard of something that, I've said or done, and just saying that it gave them, that spark to go out there and try something, right? It's, that's probably the utmost, the coolest thing that I can receive that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Probably along the lines of, hey, Shaun, I stole a bike and I went and rode around the world. Thanks for that. Anybody who's put action into an idea where they've had a life-changing outcome for them, to whatever degree that is. I like it when someone takes any nonsense that I put out there into action, and it changes their world to be a better world.
Yeah.
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 And I'm going to just take it just one step further and say that these are all what I think about too. I agree with you all. But I think the other thing is to say, if someone says you match the person that I thought you were, right? Like this, like when you actually meet a celebrity, like, or someone that you didn't know in the real world, and you meet them, what do people, they're like, they're actually a really great person, or they were actually
Yeah.
really down to earth, or they were actually who I hoped they would be. Like when those things match, I think that's like really great for everyone involved, right? It's when there's disconnect, right? When we feel like, oh, that person puts, it's an inauthentic, it's an authentic, or I was expecting something else, or maybe, I mean, the expectations are on both sides or any side. But I just think that that's an interesting thing, like where it's easy to get these things distorted, right? Over digital media and interactions, right? So it's like I think we're all looking for something that's genuine.
This is why I strive to try to keep this as authentic as possible, right? We were talking about this beginning, and when I gave you guys the topic, and you were like, "Ooh, well, where do you guys like what?" That's kind of a broad topic, and I'm like, I know. That's the point, so that we can all actively be thinking about it, actively be talking about it in an authentic manner that is not. It's not contrived. It's not written down. It's not a bullet point. We're going to touch on all these things, and I think that in terms of media wise, to your point of the Dunbar number, we keep bringing this up, but if you think back in time, the whole concept of being on a soapbox, right? How many people can you reach in a crowd? How many people can you? Well, now I can only reach 10 or 15 people around me. Well, what if I'm up on a box? Now I'm elevated. Now I can reach 50 odd people, right? Or well, what if I'm on a stage? Now I can reach 100 people, and you can kind of elevate that to this point that the digital realm has created. It's a digital soapbox, right? How many more people can you reach? How much more can we elevate ourselves to a point that we can reach more people with the information we're trying to get? And we actually got a really great question from Daniel here. He said, "Do you find that nowadays, due to social media, the populace instills too much importance on the amount of followers as a standard of success?" And so this is where I want to touch on with you guys is, do you think that the soapboxes have kind of now become that standard of like, oh, well, now I got 800,000 people I can talk to, right? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yes.
Greg, give it. You goes first.
Yeah. I mean, again, so as someone who has a large social media following, this is one of these things. Well, let me rephrase that. As someone who has a large social media following, but is not like a top tier kind of influencer, as you would call them, and actually a professional working in this field, and what others would call an expert. I hate to use that word, but it can be extremely frustrating to see the way people respond to other people who have no substance to what they're putting out because they don't have the experience or the knowledge, but they have the presentation, right? They have the amazing packaging. They've got the media team following them around and the editors and all this sort of thing. They're just pumping cash into it and producing these like, beautiful videos, photos, whatever. And I'm just focusing on the actual content. Like I'm trying to not make it look terrible, of course, but I'm trying to educate, and it's a very different approach. And so I remember distinctly at one point a couple years ago, before I had my little Instagram verification thing, some kid said he didn't agree with whatever I said, and it was some technical thing about the snatcher, clean and jerk, whatever. And he's like, well, yeah, it's obvious now why you're not verified, as if Instagram employed weightlifting experts to verify my expertise. And so it was just this like stunning demonstration of how people conflate something like a social media verified badge with subject matter expertise, despite the fact that they have absolutely no relationship to each other. Some of the most accomplished coaches I've ever met in my life, in and out of weightlifting, don't have any social media presence. They're certainly not verified. And yet, you know, how many people does that kid represent who are like, well, I'm not going to listen to this guy. He doesn't have a little blue badge next to his name. He must not know anything. He only has, 300 followers. And it's like, well, that guy's produced 10 Olympians, right? And you're following a guy who's only produced 100 YouTube videos. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
Absolutely.
Ranting and raving.
Chris, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I again, the same thing, I think there's way too much, people put way too much weight on that social media following and the way that, these people present themselves. And, in the adaptive world, I see it a lot. I look at it as a lot of these people go up there and they have a ton of followers, or they have the verified thing, and you get the highlight reel of their life all the time on social media, and you don't get the other side of it, and people get fooled, by what these people are actually like. They're not the genuine type people most of the time. And much to what, Greg said, I mean, the people that are very knowledgeable and things like that, just because they don't have the hundreds of thousands of followers, or they don't have, that little verified badge beside their name, they get discounted in that, because people are just putting such an immense amount of weight in that. And being, training young athletes, probably much like Greg, we see this all the time. And then having two younger kids, and myself, my daughter being 12, that's one of the, first things they look at. It's not about what this person does, or, what their actual accomplishments are, or, whether, they have sent, 10 Olympians under their belt compared to the guy that's just producing content to produce content. That whole realm just completely gets thrown out the window. And it's something that's, to me at least, incredibly frustrating, because people are being misinformed consistently because of these types of people. And I mean, in the fitness realm and in the sport realm, you just see it happen absolutely everywhere. And it's just, to me, it's disgusting and horribly frustrating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Emily, what do you got?
I think the issue is that, like, are these real people, right? Subtract the bots, subtract the trolls, and this has been going on since before social media. When the soapboxes were going on, there were people, selling snake oil. There's shammers. There's always going to be shysters and shammers in this world, and I think the actual struggle and question is to, how do you keep going when it feels like others are getting ahead in a way that feels cheap and inauthentic. And I mean, I think it's a little bit, you have to have faith that people do wise up eventually on these things, and they do recognize, Greg, that you actually trained Olympic athletes, and you'll see these type of people in the comments. They sometimes come through and do something and say something to be like, hey guys, have you seen this guy? He's trained, all these Olympic athletes. I manage our community at GoRuck, and the online world, it can get very ugly and messy at times. And, rewinding back a few years when the world was imploding because of the pandemic, and, all sorts of, social issues happening in our backyards. And I remember having to deal with people online, and, and deleting is not the answer, because everyone immediately just says censorship. And I agree on some level. It's just a case by case basis. But I will give you an example. This comedian who was on the Daily Show, he's gone out on his own, Ronnie Chang. He's a big hero of mine, and I'm going to go see him in a couple months perform. But I really gained a lot of respect for him as a person, as a human, because he was just a fan of our rucks. But he saw, this post that I was managing online, and that some people were going after it because it was like us commemorating Martin Luther King Day, you know, and and he basically just called them out. And this person with a verified check with a big following who he didn't have to like swoop in and say something, you know, he didn't have to stick his neck out, but he did. And I was like grateful for it in a way that, you know, it's like he saw what was going on. So that's not always going to be the case, you know. That was a good example. There's plenty of examples I can tell you. I won't even get there where things haven't gone the way the shysters have won. But I think it's a long game we're playing, right? It's like
Absolutely.
keep your nose to the ground, you know, like to the grind, like keep putting out the good content, keep doing something that you're going to be proud of, that your kids are going to be proud of. And that's, I think that's how we end up winning.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I didn't want to give the impression that I'm over here throwing my hands up in despair or anything.
No.
I've been doing it for almost 20 years now. And so it's interesting. I have had periods of time in the past where I was like, man, this is ridiculous. What a waste of time. And I've had a couple good friends say, hold on. Remember 5 years ago when you said that about specific people? Where are they now? And it's like, well, they're gone. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you said, you keep your nose to the grindstone. You do
Mm-hmm.
things that you are proud of, that you and that's always been my rule is I could make more money. I could get a bigger following if I followed the very obvious social media success formula, which is essentially just kind of being a clown. And I'm not willing to do it because I need to go to bed every night and be able to look my wife and daughter in the eye and myself and be like, I'm doing what I believe to be quality work that is actually genuinely helping people do what they're trying to do. Not
Mm-hmm.
I am, spending my day doing market research on, what kids on TikTok are going to watch because of the sound effect or, whatever stuff that people do these days. I can't even keep track anymore. And so, yes, absolutely 100%. You are correct on that.
It's a wild environment nowadays, that's for sure. Shaun, you got thoughts on
It's
this?
so out of control.
I do. So some of the points that were raised, I'm in line with. To Emily's point, the people who get to meet me in the real world, that get to shake my physical hand, often they say, and it's embarrassing for me to say it out loud, but this is what is nearly always said: he's actually the guy that you expect, but better, except he's shorter. And I am short. I'm like 5'9". Everyone says the same thing, man. That's just the way it is.
I said it right off the bat. 100%.
Yeah, everyone says the same thing. I thought you'd be bigger, and it's like that Tom Cruise part. I thought you'd be bigger, but so that is I've never really put that connection together. So thanks for that, Emily. I guess I am who I say I am. And so the other piece is, like, I've got a following of not quite 2,200 people on Instagram. That's the only place I exist. And what's great about only having 22 people, and I say only in context of Greg, who's got, I don't know, 400, 500, 600,000. I'm not sure what it is. I know it's a lot, though. Last time I looked at you when you first came on the show, I was like, to my point, wow, this dude's got a big following. But my next thought was, but I wonder if he's a goof. And then you came on the show and you weren't. You're rad. Like, you're a super cool guy. And so I love to see when the big number matches up with the cool guy. And it's like, yes, one for the team, a winner rather than a loser, as I categorize it in my mind, because it is tiring. It is draining to watch the fakeronis out there pump up their numbers, whether it's bots or whether it's bought or whether it's faked for a couple of years. Typically, they're not going to fake it that long, but whether they fake their way to the quote unquote top with a large number, and they're not as such. They're not who they represent themselves as. And it is discouraging. It's discouraging for me, for sure, when I watch the obviousness of it. It's so transparent what's going on. And to Greg's point, it would be super duper easy to start working the magic of the algorithm with all of the bells and whistles, the sizzle, the sexy things that create this alter ego almost, and fake-eroni your way to the quote unquote top. That just doesn't work for my head. That's not who I am. I try to keep it real. And so, to that realness, just came off of 7 weeks of bouncing around Asia, and my social media team was this clown, me, with my camera, my phone in my hand, shooting content that wasn't created for the interwebs. It was just me doing me. And if I was talking into it, or I was talking to someone, or I was taking a photo, it's not just all that content was just for Shaun, but I was just trying to illustrate the journey that I was on for people who'd asked me to, hey, can you show us what's going on in your life while you're over there? And it wasn't professional, but it was me. And for some reason that resonates with the people that are cool with me. And so therefore that part of that concentric circle called the collective, wherever it exists between my inner circle and the fringes, somewhere in there, all the folks that were kind of tracking what I was doing for the last 7 weeks, they were into it as based on what I'm hearing in my DMs. And they were, some people went so far as to say, what I'd love to see in 2024 is the Traveling Shaun show, where you just bounce around and do what you do. And like I don't think I could do that to the world. It was already pretty rotten what I did for 7 weeks. I feel sorry for what I put out there to some degree, but I don't have a professional team behind me. I've got zero direction. I barely understand analytics. And of course, again, my number on Instagram is less than 2,200 people. But for me, that somehow works because it doesn't feel contrived. It doesn't feel like I'm overreaching my abilities. I always try to do better. That's why I'm standing in front of a Shure microphone right now instead of talking into my phone, instead of talking into a soup can with strings. So I've found a way to kind of keep improving my game without feeling like I'm overreaching who Shaun is. And so I think by staying authentic, I feel like I can stay in the game. But to Emily's point, it can be frustrating at times where I see people shooting to the moon based on fake-eroniing it right to the moon. And as obvious as I can see it, I still, it's not that I'm resentful, and it's not that I'm bitter or twisted. It's just that it feels somehow unfair. And unfair is a problem that I've struggled with my entire life. When something feels unfair or something feels not righteous, well, then I want to sink my teeth into it. I mean, that's what Tier 1 creates. When something is unfair, you want to go sort it out. And so, I
don't go use that Tier 1 sorting out for this problem, though, Shaun.
That's right. There's no sorting this problem out. That's right. That's 100%. You've got to kind of get your namaste on and zen out on this this subject to some degree. And so I do dig that people like Greg, as an example, who, by the way, is one of my, I think I've said it in another podcast, I consider as not maybe a gold standard, but whatever a gold standard means, I consider Greg as a guy who's doing it extremely well on social media, because how you present yourself is absolutely professional, is straight to the point. And in fact, one of your more recent pieces that you put out, I stated publicly, like, what the freaking heck is going on with that Greg guy? Every single word was so super legit that I rarely hang on the edge of my seat when someone is putting across a clip. And I was on the edge of my seat for pretty much every word. I do believe I said, try to pull out a single word, try to strip out a single word in what he just said. I challenge you, because every single bit, every single word was so freaking awesome that I was just nodding throughout the entire thing. And so, I suppose it doesn't matter how big your following is. I think it matters mostly what you're putting out and whether it's legit or not. And what is legit? Well, I suppose that's in the eye of the beholder, as it were.
Absolutely. Chris, you got any additional thoughts on this? You've been quiet in the corner a little while, so I wanted to.
Oh, no. I've just been listening and taking it all in. I agree with everyone here. I think we're all on the same page in that sense. And yeah, I mean, it's very refreshing when you meet somebody, that you see online that is the person that they're, putting themselves out there to be, because there are a tremendous amount of people out there that it's just a completely fake or fake-ish persona. And when you actually get to meet some of these people, it's just a whole different, whole different realm. They're not the people that they, are trying to project to everybody else. And that's just it's a disappointing thing at the end of the day. Right. And so to see, to hear that everybody else is, feels the same way about that, it's a refreshing thing.
Absolutely.
Can I add something real quick? Because Shaun, of course, you always make me think of something new. And thank you, by the way, for what you just said. I really appreciate that. But trying to steer it back, since we've gone so far afield from the mindset and relationships thing, I think one of the critical things, to speak to your point about authenticity and being more concerned about what you're putting out versus the number of followers you have, is if your goal is contribution and service, right? My goal is putting out things that are going to help other people, rather than having the transactional mindset. Well, I put this out so that you give me something in return. That's where we run into so many problems. And that's the transactional model is the social media influencer thing, right? Is I build up this giant audience, you follow me so that I can get sponsorships and money and fame and all these things to gratify myself, right? Versus I have 2,200 followers, but man, I put this stuff out, they eat it up, they love it. I get this great feedback that they're enjoying it and appreciating it. And that's what matters. And in the same way, I put that stuff out, and as frustrating and discouraging as it can be to see silly stuff get so popular, to me, it ends up not mattering at the end of the day when I meet somebody in person and they say, thank you, you did this, I really appreciate it, you helped me get to this competition, or you helped me sort this thing out in my life, whatever. Then in that moment, it doesn't matter how many hundreds of thousands of followers you have. You're one-on-one with that person, and recognizing that you have, through this weird medium, created this meaningful relationship in which you have served somebody else. You have contributed something of value to that person. And that makes it worthwhile. All the silly stuff and the stress and pulling my hair out because so-and-so did this and it's so ridiculous doesn't matter anymore in that moment. And so I think having that mindset is understanding, what is my purpose? What is meaningful to me? And I think it's true for everyone here, is providing something of value to other people. And that is the purpose, not as a step to get something in return as a transaction, but that is the end goal. I want to help you. And when that happens, then done, you win the game, right?
Yeah. Everybody keeps taking my points. I have all these questions and stuff written down. You guys are hitting on every single one of them before I can even get there. To your point, the concept we're going to have to finish off with this thought here, is that the difference between using the network and utilizing the network. And I think this is something that I use quite a bit in my own head, is that, we've created this network through the collective, and I've been able to bring in a bunch of guests and have them on here and do all these questions and have these great conversations and all this stuff. But at no point do I ever want to use that network for anything else. Now, I will utilize it to the best of my ability. Like, for instance, I talked to Greg a few times. I'm like, hey man, you know anybody that'd be cool to have on the show that'd be good conversation wise? And he's given me some people. I think I've asked Emily as well as Chris, and everybody else that's been on the show I've asked as well. But I'm not looking to use them for our benefit, right? It's not that I want them to open up a new realm that then I can go and, I'm going to take this and that and those things. It's about building that network. It's about expanding those concentric circles. It's about adding a new concentric circle into, or linking one circle to another circle, right? Now that, we've all been connected through the collective, I have access to Emily's network. I'm not going to use that network, but I have access to it, right? Because now Emily and I have been on here a couple times, and we've created a relationship, and we've been able to manage this. So the thought that I have is, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, is that what we're actually doing using social media to what we've kind of all agreed as the good way to use it, is we're trying to connect through authentic or maybe accurate information at its core level. is that's my whole goal is, right, all I want to do is pass information to other people. And I think it's similar to you guys as well, is that, you know, you're trying to develop those connections through the information, not through the bravado or what I'm wearing today or whatever. It's through the core information. What do you guys think on that one? Chris, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's something that we all share, you know, as that really, you know, with that mindset that we all have. I don't think anybody here is of that mindset where we're more of a user type person. We're not going to look at this group that we're here with and, you know, try and pump or inflate our own stuff to, you know, to use, use another person. I mean, that's just something that I don't think anyone here has that type of mentality. It is that, you know, have that collective group that you've brought together, and where we all have that, like I stated earlier, have that same mindset. And I think that trust piece, because of everybody that you have within that collective group, is there. And, you know, I have the smallest social media following out there. I'm just a very quiet guy in that sense, but, you know, I wouldn't, you know, I know that anybody in this room wouldn't go out here and use anything, you know, along my lines to go out and try and better themselves, right? Like, that's just not what anyone here is like. I mean, if they're going to go out there and, you know, sorry, I'm lost for the word here, but you know, they're gonna use the group in a way that is beneficial, I guess, right? It's a mutually beneficial group that way, and I think that's what makes, you know, what you guys do so incredible, is that the relationships that are built through this platform are relationships that are, you know, I think there's trust that is instilled there already because of who you guys are and who you bring onto the show. And people here don't have to worry about somebody going out there and having that type of issue with anybody here.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Emily, thoughts on this?
Yeah, Chris made a good point. Like, I think the difference, there's some differences in what the collective is doing in this sort of conversation. I think one, it's long form. You know, it's not just a sound bite. It's you're also not, like you said, giving a script. It's very open-ended. I think that's why, one of the reasons I like it, because I like to hear what other people have to say, and I like to be able to speak, you know, freely and you know, not even really know where this is going to go. That's very exploratory, and you don't find a lot of that in some of these online settings. I was listening to the author of *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari. He was saying he doesn't like to have any conversations or interviews like under 3 hours. You know, you find that a lot of these, you know, sort of thought leaders are moving in that direction. And I think it's for a purpose, to get away from the sound bites. And I also think that another element of the collective is the service element. There's a code of conduct. Like, you know, Chance, you're not going to ask me for my network without my permission, right? Or you're not, you know what I mean? You're going to come through, you're going to obtain that access the right way, because you understand, like, this, you know, we have an understanding, we have this commonality with that. And I think that's different than some of these other users of social media. I don't think all of these users are created equally. I think there's plenty of people out there that are using the networks, not utilizing them. And, you know, on some level, can you blame, you can't blame them completely. They're probably like, I got to eat, you know, you know, this is how I put food on the table. So try to keep that in perspective. Sometimes it's not how I want to live. You know, I mean, I'm with Chris. I'd rather have like the small, like, this isn't where I want to focus on. But being said, you know, if I were in Greg's shoes, where I had this skill set and this knowledge that I want to educate more people on, and I want to amplify that, and I want a soapbox, then then that's good that you have all those followers and that you are taking it seriously what you put out there. And it sounds like you've been at it for a long time. And I think that speaks to a lot of that kind of growth, sustained growth. So, I'll just wrap this up. Like, we at GoRuck, for our business, it was like, for a while, we were just throwing a lot of money into ads. And we were like, we don't even know what the attribution model is. We don't even know where this money is going. And it's like the algorithm changes all the time, and it's fickle, and as are people. And so we decided to just really pull back and limit the, I mean, you got to put some on, right? As a business, we all know it's a necessity, but it's like finding that sweet spot between putting a little bit, but also making sure that you're not just pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into advertising through an algorithm that may or may not reach the people that you want to reach and is out of your control. And put your resources towards the things that are gonna, like, doing like real live events with real people and community action, service opportunities, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, thoughts on this?
Yeah, going back to the kind of use versus utilize, that is a key mindset in any relationship, especially when you're talking about a network, right? Am I going to exploit this network for my personal benefit, or am I going to see it as an opportunity, as more of like kind of a symbiotic relationship where it's, again, I think Chris said, it's mutually beneficial. Even looking at this, one episode of The Collective, I come on here having essentially no thoughts on the topic. I see the topic an hour before and I'm like, I have no idea what I think about that yet. But then I get on here and we have this interaction and I learn a ton from it. And so if I wanted to serve somebody and produce content on this topic, I wouldn't know where to start. But now, by being a part of this show, I can provide my thoughts that are hopefully helpful to somebody, because I had it, not just symbiosis, it's synergy, right? Is the five of us together are able to produce a better product for people. I hate to use the word product, but you know what I mean. We can produce something more valuable together through that synergy than I think any one of us could put out individually. And so, learning to see these types of relationships in that light, I think, is really critical. Although I'm not saying I wouldn't, I'd be upset about a GoRuck sponsorship or anything, Emily. Just throw that out there. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. The last thing I need is more rucking in my life. But point being is it's a totally different way of looking at it. Instead of me coming on here and it's like, all right, well, what can I get out of Chris? Maybe he'll post something about me, or maybe I can get a free backpack from Emily, or maybe Shaun's going to teach me long range shooting one of these days, or whatever the case is. It's more like, how am I going to use this to make myself smarter and more valuable and more useful, which is like the primary purpose in my life, and how am I going to help contribute to this conversation that's going to then contribute to all these other people who are getting a chance to listen to it.
Absolutely. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
I do. So, one of the interesting phenomena that we've seen over here on The Collective, and I'm going to say it out publicly because I think that we don't often say it at all, is how it kind of works with guests showing up to the show. So it is through relationships with other guests. So at one point we had no guests, and then we started getting guests. And then those guests started saying, hey, you know what? This is unlike anything that I've ever been on before. In fact, you're now my new favorite podcast. And I've been on a few podcasts. So I really like what you guys are doing. One of my friends, I think, would be a good guest. And we kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, you got a friend who'd like to be on. Let's do that. And so over a period of time, what is now the case is we either have repeat guests or we have first-time guests. And repeat guests, when they come back, are kind of like this panel right now, where they're like, yeah, I kind of dig what's happening. And it's not what we're doing, as in Shaun and Chance, but it's what we do as a group. They kind of like that. And so, to Greg's point, after the fact, we're all richer for it. And somehow that tertiary effect, or that ripple on impact within our future lives, has made us richer people for it and allows us to be better for those that we're serving. And so that is the trickle on effect of repeat guests. But first time guests, when they come on, they are coming on based on a trust that their friend who was on the show previously has said, hey, you should give it a go because I think that you're really going to enjoy it. And so a first timer is putting their trust in a probably a long-term relationship where they trust the other individual to guide them towards the collective. And when that first timer is done, once we bounce into the green room, there has never been a time when that first timer doesn't say, wow, that was freaking awesome, or words to the effect of, that was like actually what my friend said it would be. I'm glad I came on because of ... Now, I don't like saying that out loud because it feels like I'm kind of flaring out to some degree, but I'm not flaring out for Shaun. I'm flaring out for the group that is currently here right now, and anyone that they will introduce to the collective as a first timer. Because I know that the first timer is going to say words to the effect of what I just stated, because I've just heard it like 250 times or more. And so every single first timer that's come on almost states the same thing. This was unlike what they expected. It was better than what they expected. And it was better because of all of the things that we've been talking about today. That kind of authentic, honest conversation where we're just trying to serve. I'm not trying to sell hats. I'm just trying to serve and not getting paid for it. And I'm good with that because I get to be richer in the moment every minute that I listen to a guest. I've had so many firmware upgrades since we started this show via all of the guests that I've got to listen to. Sometimes I'll process what was said in this hour for several more hours throughout my day. And it's not like I sit down and get to homework. They're just the ideas that kind of bubble up in my head as a curious mind. It evolves me in this hour. And so I think that anyone who's listening to this should consider that the relationships that get formed on the show, by you listening to it, you're in the game. You're part of the collective. But there's a concentric circle of the collective that kind of tightens down to like being on the show. Like if you've been on the show, it's a different concentric circle. It's a different understanding. And once we bounce into the green room, it's again a different concentric circle. So I'm not saying try to get on the show. I mean, you'll get on the show if you're cool, because you'll know some of these people and they'll introduce you because they'll be like, bro, you're cool enough to go on the show. So, and the reason I say that is because Greg introduced us to Tamara. And she's like super freaking cool. I follow her now.
She's
on
like
IG.
one of the coolest people you'll
She's
ever meet.
So freaking cool. And so, do I have to like any of Tamara's stuff? Well, she just put up a little thing there the other day where, the son is just sitting there with the golf club and trying to crack out some balls. And like I just see the cool person in her in the show. And then after the fact, I'm still checking out what she's putting down. And I'm still digging it because she is who she is. She's authentic and she's super freaking cool. And I need more of that in my life. And so I don't have to like her stuff, but I did because it's so freaking legit. And so I think that is kind of a cool nod to the sort of quality people that come on here is once they bounce, there's no reason for me to like their stuff or no reason for me to follow them. There's no reason at all other than if you're cool, you're cool. And if you're in the game, then I'm into it. And you're definitely going to get a like for me. So, that's just my thoughts on concentric circles of being on the show.
Yeah, it's been quite the realm to enter into, especially with the size of the network now, because it's quite extensive. But we are a little bit over time here. I want to get some final thoughts real quick, but I'm going to run through some of these comments because there's a bunch. It was just a little difficult to sneak them into the conversation. It was just so good. So first off, thank you, Emily, Chris, Greg. Fantastic conversation. Really appreciate it. This has been fantastic. Lisa jumped on, or actually back all the way to the top We got Satch jumped in. Good morning, team. Lisa, good afternoon, everyone. Daniel Levante said, great points and perspective from Greg 15 minutes in, right off the bat. See, and you thought didn't know what you were talking about, but you had some good
That's so long ago. I don't remember what that was.
right. Says there's definitely a positive that can be taken through the digital platform that may aid one person or the many, or be a source of inspiration for betterment, or even a link to lean on for people to help. Absolutely. Valiant Thor jumped on here. Correct. This is a disturbing trend emerging in the media wherein they seem to feel it's their duty to determine which ideas people are allowed to be exposed to. That's a whole nother podcast we're going to get into.
Another podcast.
Yeah. He also carries on. There's been so much secrecy, disinformation over the last 100 years that it's become impossible to prove anything in the face of official denial. That, again, another podcast. He was watching from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Isotope Production. Good to see you, Valiant. And then he said, have a blessed day. So fantastic. Daniel jumped on here and said, that's what I liked about GoRuck's goal to make you move challenge. Make you move, challenge yourself, and get a community through it, which is 100% true. I love the fact that there's nothing like a rucking community because, shared suffering, suffering, not just suffering, shared suffering.
Right.
Winter Storm's got a great talk. Lisa Meyer, I love it here. Love seeing you here. Thank you, everyone. Great live. So let's get some final thoughts on anything that we've gone over. We've gone over quite a bit, but anything at all, anything still bubbling in the back of your guys' heads? What do you got, Greg? Coming to you first.
Oh man, no, I need to stop talking so much. I just really quick to speak to what Shaun was saying is I've been on a lot of podcasts. Like I don't even know how many, but a lot. And it's very interesting to me that I can't think of another one of those podcasts where you could really be a repeat guest in a way that made sense. Right. Whereas this one, I think now this is the third or fourth time I've been on, and it's something totally new, totally different every time. And I enjoy it every time, which is why I keep doing it. And so I think that there's a very special formula there by having the different guests, the totally different topics, and having that constant change of the pairing or partnering of guests, I think is really key. And you guys don't have anywhere near as many viewers and followers as you should have. So I'll keep reposting your stuff, especially when I'm on it. And we'll keep pushing people towards you.
Absolutely. Chris?
Make me look good. I'll make you look good, Shaun.
No,
Chance.
I was going to say, Shaun doesn't do any of the editing. That's all over here. But I appreciate it. And yes, absolutely. When you say smart things, you get put up on the clip. So just as a heads up. Chris?
I would need you guys to set me up for that, though. That's Shaun's job. You edit, you cut out the dumb things I say. Shaun sets me up for the good things to say. It's a winning formula.
100%. Chris, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's, getting to do this. I've done a fair number of podcasts myself, and I mean, this is just such a unique one and something. I mean, when I was asked my second time back on it, just the amount of growth that I'm able to experience personally from it, and hearing so many different perspectives and different ideas around some of these types of things, right? I mean, they're not often talked about subjects, right? I mean, when I found out that this was going to be about the relationship mindset, I was the same as Greg, just going, oh wow, like what am I gonna say about this? It's something I've obviously thought about, but never actually, had to put it into spoken word per se. And so to be able to come on and have these types of conversations and just have that personal growth is something that I just find extremely valuable, to be connected to everybody that's here in that sense, and to be able to have, to take this as just such a big learning experience. It's one of my favorite things to do, is just to get out there and hear other people talk and learn from what they have to say and learn from their experiences. And everybody here is so diverse that you do get different, it's different angles for all these different types of subjects. And it's a really cool experience to be able to do that and to continue to grow as a human.
Absolutely. We appreciate you having you on. Like everybody, absolutely. This is, I love the fact that we get this level of diversity in terms of background and lifestyles and thoughts and all these things. Fantastic. Emily, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in a world where this type of real conversation is becoming more and more rare, it's really refreshing and daring. I think that you guys do this. So kudos, keep it up. I just want to loop back to something at the beginning when we were talking about, relationship mindset. And I think something that it's worth repeating is like, time is our most valuable resource. And, on average, humans, we only have 4,000 weeks on this earth, and so I think for me, it's really puts in perspective when you Google those, on Reddit, data is beautiful. Like, how much time do people spend across their lifetimes? If you look at those graphs and you see like what we were kind of talking about again, like all these different kinds of relationships, with yourself, with friends, with family, with children, with your significant other, and like where do those time allotments, because it might not help you, and it fix things from the past, but it can inform your time moving forward. And the amount of time people spend alone at the end, it's like, gather up as much interesting interesting things along the way, so you can sit like Shaun and be thinking about percolating on this, towards the end of your life. So thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. I've looked at some of those graphs, and the disproportionate amount of time people spend on the toilet is that's surprising, right?
So we do our best reading.
Right? Shaun, you got final thoughts?
I do. I'm going to wrap it up by looping back to something that Emily had said, and she had mentioned that both of us had entered into a DM or direct messaging back and forth on a subject that, listen, I gained just as much from, because what I realized when we were DMing back and forth was simply that I'll call myself a cool person, because I'm going to say two cool people were just bouncing a couple of ideas off of each other on a subject that I thought we both we both gained from, in the sense of it was a good combo. And no one needs to know what that topic was. No one needs to know what was discussed. No one needs to know how deep or shallow we went. I need to know. And if Emily hadn't brought it up, I wouldn't have spoken about it. But it's like a little moment in my past year of hanging out on the collective that, believe it or not, is like a little cool little moment for me that I've been remembering ever since. But I do lots of moments like that. But for some reason, that little interaction with Emily felt like important. And so it was important because she's a cool person. And somehow I felt like we were really vibing in the moment. And I think that that's what a lot of the collective is about, is vibing with like-minded people. And that vibe can, in 60 seconds, can ripple on for another couple of decades, perhaps. We'll see how that all plays out. But I think that the vibe of what happens over here is a critical point of the discussion that we didn't raise, but maybe we'll raise it in another podcast, that we all seem to be on the same sort of synchronous path, or the same level of existence, where we do appreciate good people, where we do appreciate wisdom, where we do appreciate growing as a group. And perhaps it's the authenticity, perhaps it's the decades of wisdom, who knows what it is, but I do feel that there is a vibe over here that is a bit different than other locations. And so I just wanted to use Emily maybe as the proxy to explain that what happens in the show here live ripples on in eternity through follow-on things that no one needs to know about, but should understand do occur.
Absolutely. I don't have much to add on to this. It's been just a fantastic conversation. I keep using this word fantastic, and it is truly fantastic in my mind, because this was a fantasy at one point, in terms of like being diving into podcasting and the ability to talk to people and engage people on a moment's notice that you haven't talked to before. Like this is a fantastical kind of situation, and I just love it. I love every minute of this. This is so much fun for me to be able to sit, and I haven't said much this last hour and 20 minutes, because the conversation has been so in depth and authentic. So I really, again, I appreciate it. It's been awesome. The only thing I'm going to end with is when it comes to social media wise, when it comes to dealing with all this other stuff and all of the negativity and all these things, we had a guest on a while ago that I got to get back on, Chris Howder. And one of the lines he's famous for is, "It's not about who's good, it's about who's left." And so with this, we're not stopping. We're just going to keep going. We're going to keep kicking butt until we decide that that's enough butt kicking. I don't know. I don't know when we're going to stop this, but we're going to be the ones that are left. And all the haters and all the people that are, playing the game and playing the algorithm, cool. You do you. We'll do us. And we're going to keep going. So we're going to continually learn. We're going to continually build. And we're going to continue to grow every day. And you all can do that with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.